Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where I'm your host, Chris, and with me today is a very special guest. I've been trying to get this person on the channel now for a while. I feel like it's been 2 or 3 seasons of us messaging each other back and forth, and this felt like the perfect opportunity to introduce, for those who don't know who this person is, Bandit Survivor to the channel. Bandit Survivor has got his own YouTube channel, and it's a really good YouTube channel. He predominantly focuses on international Survivor with a little bit of a sprinkle of Survivor US, because I think that's the one that got us all sort of involved. But I've worked with Bandit Survivor on a collab, and I believe there might be another one in the future coming soon.
Next week, yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that one as well. But I think there's this whole series that you do on all the moves, the best moves that International Survivor has sort of concocted over the years. And I did one for Australian Survivor with you, which was a lot of fun. But Bandit Survivor, all the way from the UK, welcome. How are you doing?
Oh, dude, it is so good to be here. As you said, we've been scheduling this back and forth for a few months, and our time zones have not really worked out, but it's so good to be here. And at the end of the day, it's me chatting to one of my best mates online about my favorite show on my home turf. How could I say no at the end of the day? So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we're all very excited to have you here today. I mean, this is a little bit different from what you normally do, because you always have the shorter form videos. You get a bit of an opportunity to put your thoughts into the content, before you hit the submit button. But, I think Survivor UK is the perfect one for you to come on and do the longer podcast format. Have you done podcasts before on Survivor, or is this the worldwide premiere?
So I've done them on a few different channels, but this would be the main one, talking about Survivor UK and talking about my thoughts about it. And as we all know, I love to share my thoughts online. And Chris, I know you have your own thoughts about Survivor UK as well. Yeah. So it's going to be perfect, as well as everyone in the chat as well sharing their own ideas. I think this is going to be a great podcast.
Yeah, hopefully we get more and more people coming in on the live, and we'll bring up the comments as we go along with this new series coming out. But before we get into it, I do need to ask you, Bandit, because there may be people coming to this channel who've never seen your content before. We do have a lot of people who watch other shows as well as Survivor. Where did you sort of get into Survivor? Because it's one thing to be a fan. It's another thing to go down this road of creating content for Survivor. What started it for you?
So let me tell you about the UK, right? And there's this very shocking thing about Survivor UK coming here in 2023. And it's shocking because we haven't really had any talk about Survivor here. It's very hard to get your hands on Survivor when you're living here in the UK. So basically, I was watching YouTube and I got recommended cringeworthy Survivor moments from another fellow YouTuber, Eager Turtle. I think we've seen quite a few of his.
Yeah, I know Eager Turtle. I've actually been on a podcast or two with him.
Perfect. And it was a situation where he would keep up coming into my feed, and I think I watched the first ever video he uploaded, and then I stopped watching for a little while, and I would just keep on getting recommended them. So eventually I just watched them. Then Survivor gets into your algorithm, and then you're watching Peridium. So I decided to check out the show for myself eventually. And I was very blessed, because the first ever season I watched was David versus Goliath, which is a pretty good season. And from that point on, I've got into YouTube. I started content creation, been collaborating with individuals, and it's just gone from strength to strength there.
Yeah, for those that are not aware, Bandit Survivor and I have both also collaborated with Russell Muscle TV and Flynn Masters, and we'll be doing a ranking on all of the Survivor winners, which will come out very soon. I know Bandit will feature on that. Sadly, we're not going to be on the same podcast. Our dates are different, but hey, we're making it happen here tonight.
They couldn't handle us together. We would have had too many hot takes, mate.
100%. Russell Muscle looked at us and he's like, this bro chacho alliance, we need to stop it before it even hits the live over on Russell Muscle's channel.
Taken all line, mate. All the attention would be enough.
No, okay, let's have a look at some of the people here that have come into the live already. Gabe saying excited to see a new international Survivor series. I agree with you, Gabe. Welcome back to the live. Fury Tiger Wolf here says, hey, everyone. Yes, finally, UK Survivor returns. It's not a high bar to be better than the original UK versions. Now, I've never seen the original versions of the show. Did you watch any of the original stuff when it came out? Because you would have been very young, so I'm assuming if you did, it would be recorded versions of it that you would have watched.
So I've seen bits of it afterwards, and what's really interesting is that they really tried to match Borneo and the Australian outback. Like Borneo, for example, was filmed in the UK's version in Pulau Tiga. Both of them are in Southeast Asia. and they sort of had a similar cast. So they tried reimagining Survivor here quite similarly and getting similar characters. But as this commenter says quite rightfully, it's not a very high bar to beat. So Joe, and which we'll be talking about, and the Survivor UK cast, hopefully you can match the bar and get over it.
It's interesting because the comment you brought up with it trying to sort of match what Borneo did or the Outback did in those early days, culturally, the UK is a very different country, and there's going to be certain things, there's going to be a certain flavor that the UK show will have to bring to keep audiences entertained. That's going to be different. I mean, we see this now with international Survivor already. I feel like Australian Survivor is very different from Survivor US, and it brings very different characters. It has a different tone to it. Just like Survivor South Africa has a very different tone to what you see in the US. So I feel like somewhere down the line, Bandit, the UK will have to find its own identity within the show and not try to be a copycat.
100%. And you even think back to like Blood versus Water, where Sandra was on the season, and she, like, one of the first tribal councils there, she's literally like, the Australians, they like their own aggressive gameplay. They love their blind sides even more than the US. And it's almost like having to learn a new game because there's so many different ideologies coming in. And I'll be interested in how many sort of super fans are coming into this Survivor UK season and how many perspectives from international or Survivor US seasons they're going to bring with them.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, going into the season, they did put casting, they had it open to people from all walks of life to apply in the UK. It doesn't look, but we don't know much about the cast yet, but it doesn't look like they went down the route of getting celebrities on the show, which I'm not a fan of. I don't like it when they bring celebrities onto Survivor. I feel like the show is better played when it's a completely new cast. It's one of the reasons why in the early days of Survivor South Africa, Bandit, still up until this point, I'm not a fan of the Dark Ages. I'm not a fan of all those early seasons where it was a different show. It had a lot of celebrities on it, and it just didn't sit well with me. And I'm not surprised that when Leroux Botha came in at season 5, that the show completely changed and it actually became a show that I like watching. Not 5 wasn't perfect. It had 2 captains, 2 previous sports stars, but hopefully they stay away from that over in the UK.
And if you think about champions, you know, they do have legends and they had like sporting stars in, but they were more so in the background, as you said. Like, they weren't playing in the game. There were certain individuals that were coming in for the challenges just to help out, but it was the cast and it was just focused on the cast, and the captains didn't really, you know, impact the gameplay that much. But it's quite interesting because here in the UK we have this show called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. So I think that's why they might steer away from celebrity casting. They might do what they're doing in the US, where they might bring on 1 or 2 celebrities from here on out on a season, but I don't think we're going to be getting something like Australian Survivor 2006, where it's just all celebrities. I don't know how that worked out. Or, you know, like your South African
champions versus contenders, they still do it a lot. Like, it's one of the criticisms. I know a lot of people say Australian Survivor is the premier show, and I agree. On a lot of places, it does hit it out of the park. I'm not a fan of stunt casting and getting like influencers and previous sports stars and that on the show. But clearly people are engaging with it and the numbers are there. It's working for Australian Survivor. And if that is how we continue to get new seasons, you know, as long as they make it an interesting casting choice, I don't have a problem with it. Like a famous one that came over to play the show was Matt Rogers, who was a previous rugby star that I was a big fan of in his rugby days. And he took like a duck to water to the game and the strategy, and actually became also a great Survivor player. So if it's like that, I don't mind supporting them. You know, Abby, I wasn't too angry at either. Abby was a good player as well. She was a sports star coming in. So as long as they add something, like the personality needs to be there for me more so than anything else.
And I think it's also an understanding of the game. You brought up a really good point about like Matt Rogers and even like Pia from Champions vs. Contenders too. They sort of have these understandings, these ground level understandings of Survivor and the game, so that when they come out on the beach, they aren't trying to work out what on earth is going on. And as you said, Matt, he took to the game like a duck in water. Like in Champions vs. Contenders, he dominated the game up until his blindside. And that's because he had a very good understanding of the game. And it'll be interesting if they do cast celebrities on Survivor UK, are they going to be picking individuals that are just bigger names, or are they going to try and go for more of a middle ground, like with your Matt Rogers or your Piers, where it's people that have a bit more of an understanding of the game and also are well known?
Yeah, or will it be celebrities in the sense of they've played reality TV before? Because I know that The Challenge, a different show that we cover here on the channel, they have started dipping into the Georgie Shores, the Love Islands, the people that are from that sort of wheelhouse over in the UK, because all of those people have like 1 million followers on Instagram, which is pretty impressive. So with that, obviously comes eyeballs to the show. And there has been some big characters that have come from some of those shows. But I want to read a couple more of the comments here just before we start getting into some of the main talking points I want to go through today as we talk about Survivor UK here. Will saying Survivor UK is already better than the new era. Are you high or low on that comment? How do you feel about New Age Survivor, Bandit? Give us the low, give us like, this is the TNT channel for a reason. Give us the hot takes.
As we all know, I love Modern Survivor. Definitely haven't criticized it at all on my channel. No, like, it's interesting because it feels like at certain points, like the game's fighting with itself almost. Like you have, these very small tribes, and then you get to the merge where it's half of a merge where half people are immune and then half aren't. Then you have a normal round of gameplay, and then you split the tribe in half again, and you've got half of the tribes, like in Survivor 41 to 43, 44, they did the final 11 split. But there are definitely benefits of the modern era. There are advantages that I like the Champions Twist, or I think the Shot in the Dark is quite good. Even something like the Ship Wheel Dilemma, I think could be beneficial with bigger tribes. But it'll be interesting for Survivor US, how they take like criticism on board. Obviously, I've done a critique of Modern Survivor and all the issues. I know that other people have as well.
Yeah,
and we
might be of us have ranted.
Yes, and we might be getting the auction in Survivor 45. So at least to some degree, I think they're trying to listen to us.
Yeah, let's hope for the best. I still believe that there is hope for Survivor US, but some of the newer seasons, Jeff has just tried to do too much, and we've documented that very well here on this channel. But I do want to get into some of the talking points, because you already started touching a little bit on format and all that kind of stuff. So we'll definitely talk about the format. We'll talk about the things that we do know about Survivor UK at this stage, which is limited. I'll be honest, but let's talk a little bit about the person who is trusted to, I guess, bring this to the UK audience. And this is a big role. Like Jeff Probst came into Survivor when he was 36 years old, a very young guy. Joel, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right. You might be able to help me here. Joel Dommett, is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So Joel Dommett is 36 years old, which is good juju. He's exactly the same age that Jeff Probst was when he came into the show. He's got experience. I think more experience than Jeff had coming into Survivor on quite a lot of different TV shows. Like, obviously, he's been the main host for Masked Singer over in the UK, which averaged between 5.7 to 8.6 million views each episode, which is on par with what you see in the US, with the US show getting about 6 million people viewing it each episode. So he's got experience being in front of a big crowd and having to deliver. He's a stand-up comedian. I like the fact that he's a stand-up comedian, because stand-up comedians, they have to be someone that is really perceptive of their surroundings and social dynamics, because the bread and butter of a stand-up comedian is to take certain situations and turn it into a joke. And you have to be self-aware and understand things and read people to be able to do that. So I think this is all skills that's going to help him. And just before I get you to jump in there, the last thing I wanted to add is I've watched this one show that he's done, which got me very excited. It's called Joel and Nish versus the World. And I've watched a few episodes where they go to different cultures around the world. They embrace non-Western cultures, sleep and live with these people, learn all of their traditions and things like that, and then also train with TIE fighters or people in Africa and that. And that to me screams that this guy's got a lot of experience. And I'm very excited for this guy. Like, I hope I'm not overselling him, but he seems like the right choice for me here, Bandit.
I know he just seems like, as you say, like the perfect fit for it. And you brought up his comedy background, and instantly I was like, yes, because he is someone that obviously goes to a lot of comedy shows, but he's also someone that goes to like these comedy formats. So like 8 out of 10 Cats, these celebrity editions, and these are filmed shows where a lot of things are coming out to blindside him, and he just has to react quickly and make a funny joke about it. Similar to Survivor, where obviously you're in tribal council, a contestant says something and you have to play off of that as the host. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how he works. And I feel like he's going to be a bit more witty, and I feel like he's going to try and have a bit more humor with the contestants, which I personally wouldn't mind in tribal council formats or even challenges. I think that works really well. As we all know, Sassy Jeff, Sassy JLP, and JLP
100%.
especially has some really good dynamics with the host, with the contestants on the show, and that could be something similar that Joe brings.
And one of the things that, again, I'm going to come back to this, that stands out to me, he is the same age that Jeff was when he started, 36 years old, but he's got clearly an old head on his shoulders because he's gone around and experienced a lot up until this point in life. Like, he's not been sitting at home, sort of secluding himself from society. But what I really like about this is that I feel like to start a franchise right now in the UK and to hopefully have it there for 10 years, 15 years, you need to get somebody young and energetic in there that can translate well to the younger audience, because the younger audience is the audience that's going to be your customers 20 years down the line. Like, for instance, when I started watching Survivor, I was 10 years old, 11 years old when Richard Hatch first won, when the bad guy in my mind back then won the show, and it absolutely broke my mind and I was hooked. But having, I think, a younger host is the right move here, because the other hosts, they're all around 50 already.
And if you think about it, like, it's obviously a survival show. The hosts have to run around and they have to have like they have to be well physically. And Joel is someone that I feel like is going to be very up for the job. He's going to be someone that's going to do it well. As you say, you need energy if you're in the hosting role, which Joel will bring. And he also was in, I believe, I'm a Celebrity 2016. So he's literally been on survival shows. He knows what the contestants are experiencing, and sort of he can understand things from their perspective, and even got second place on the show. So he's definitely someone that knows what it's like to survive and survive for a long time on a remote place.
Yeah. Well, listen, that even sells it more to me. I feel like he is one of the people coming into this with the most experience. He's got a good following online as well. Facebook, he's got 269,000 followers. Twitter, he's got 254,000 followers. Instagram, 845,000 followers. So I think when the show rolls out, if he starts promoting it, people will watch. There will be some name recognition with having someone like that on the show. So I feel that they made a really, really good choice here. I do want to go to the next point here that I wanted to sort of discuss with you is, currently in the UK is familiar with reality TV shows. There's a lot of reality TV shows out there, but you live out there. You kind of have the lay of the land. Mm-hmm. Where do you think this is going to sit? How is this going to compete with the Geordie Shores, if that still goes, Love Islands, Circle, Traders? Where will this sit? How do you think it can do against some of these other sort of shows that are out there?
So I'm in two minds about this, Chris, right? So the first mind is that as the UK, we really like, as the audience, having our opinion known. Like, you mentioned Love Island, you mentioned some of these other shows, Big Brother UK starting back up around this time, and they all allow the viewer at home to be able to have their input on the show. So Love Island specifically, they'll have rounds where you can choose to evict someone or pair two people together as the viewer from home. Survivor isn't like that in the UK, or we haven't had confirmation of here in the UK. Survivor will be like that, where we don't have any say. You can film Survivor and you can show it to nobody, and you still have a winner and a runner-up, and the whole season plays out the same. So it'll be quite interesting seeing how that comes into the modern format 2023. However, as you said, obviously the Traders is back, Big Brother UK starting back. Like, the Circle is big here in the UK. It feels like we're sort of having this boom of social reality shows that are starting up here in the UK. And I feel like it's going to be very advantageous for Survivor that suddenly we're all going to be swarmed with these social strategy shows, and people are going to be in a lot more. Like, you think about Big Brother viewers, they'll be coming in watching Big Brother UK, and then they realize we have Survivor UK, so they might check out that as well. So I think that that's going to be advantageous.
Yeah. So do you think that the survival aspect of Survivor, which is very old school now, right? Like, going out there trying to survive out on the land, is that something that appeals to people in the UK? Is there an element, like, for instance, in Australia, the outback is massive, taking your four-wheel out to go into the woods and, go camp and stuff. That's a massive part of the Aussie culture here, similar to how people in South Africa are really into that. And I think it's also one of the reasons where people actually are interested in people surviving the elements, not just the strategy side of that. Will that play an effect on people over in the UK when the show happens?
I think that the UK will be quite into the survival aspect of the show. I'm interested in how the editors will approach it, because if you think about it, Survivor US, we actually have complaints in the modern era, getting back to your earlier point, Chris, about one of the criticisms of the modern era, where
100%.
we aren't having tribe life scenes and we aren't having survival scenes. It's just strategy, strategy, strategy. Whereas you compare it to something like Survivor Australia, where like Blood versus Water, for example, there were criticisms about it having too much tribe life scene and too much camp
Yeah.
scenes.
There was
So
nothing else to show. There wasn't much happening on Blood vs. Water outside of the tribe life scenes.
I remember one episode, and it's like literally Geordie and Sam for the first 8 minutes. Yeah. They're the only two people that have confessionals, but
they were carrying it.
I think it's a good foundation that obviously is coming to UK, and UK are into their survival shows. Like obviously Bear Grylls is big here. We have like these survival shows where you put people on like a remote island. There's actually a show that's being broadcasted right now where they put 12 strangers on a remote area and they have to survive. So it's not a social strategy game, but it's like you put 12 people in the wilderness and they survive. So it seems like also survival shows are starting to get a bit of a update now in 2023 here in the UK.
I did want to touch on the reality TV era that we're in now. And you mentioned that there's so much social, reality TV. I kind of look at it as like even the competitive reality TV space. It's just blowing up. And it's not just the UK. It's happening in the US. It's happening in Australia. I mean, it's even New Zealand now. We just had Traders New Zealand drop. It's hard to keep up with all of the reality TV. For me, I kind of feel like we're now in the comic book era of movies when it comes to reality TV, where everything seems to just happen at the same time. And there's almost slam dunk after slam dunk after slam dunk. And I wonder what is like, it's great for people like you and I who love this type of shows and love to talk about it. But I kind of wonder how long it can last. But a brand such as Survivor, it seems like it comes with a heavy name, a heavy reputation, that there should be a good chance for it to do well. I noticed that previously it was done by ITV over in the UK. And what I sort of saw when I started reading into it a little bit, they said that ITV really dropped it on people without promoting it. There wasn't a real big marketing push behind it. A lot of people didn't even know that their country had Survivor until it was too late before the show got cancelled.
Exactly.
What do you think the chances are that BBC will make the same mistake? Is BBC a little bit more in a position to be able to push a marketing drive behind this thing and really, and will BBC care? Because they've got other shows like Love Island, Britain's Got Talent, X Factor, Big Brother UK, shows that are already doing extremely well. Will they care enough to push the Survivor brand over there?
So it's interesting. Obviously, Chris, you would know about Australian Survivor, where they had the 2002 edition and the 2006 edition. And I feel like from my background reading into them, the 2006 edition wasn't pushed as much in TV media. And that's how we had, obviously, the decade gap between the seasons. And this is quite interesting because the very first trailer we had of Survivor UK, I don't know if you saw it, but it wasn't Survivor UK, which was very worrying. It was Champions vs. Contenders 1 and 2 footage. And they were just saying, oh, yes, it's a hype package for Survivor UK. Now we have got a trailer, and it's interesting how they're going to try and push it because, as you say, the advertising for the first 2 seasons wasn't that great. But obviously, we'll have Joel Dommett, which is going to be promoting it on his socials, although Joel has quite a lot of things that are going on. Like, I'm surprised that he even has the time to dedicate to Survivor UK because he's part of so many things, as you said, as we brought up. But I think it'll work out well, especially because there's so many different social strategy shows that are going to be going on, and I feel like they link together quite well. But Survivor, especially when it's starting up, is a show that really needs sort of that advertising push because I know people in the UK that don't even know that Survivor is coming back and didn't even know that Survivor was still originally in the UK. So hopefully they are able to push it. And I know that they've done promotional trailers. I'd like to see maybe some more trailers coming out over the next while, but I have high hopes and I do trust that they'll be able to push it.
Okay, I've got a lot to say on that, but I want to go back to the live audience here and just get a couple of comments back up here. Gabe has said, since this is the season 1 reboot, should we expect its slower gameplay like earlier Survivor, or is that up to the cast? You bring up an interesting point with the fact that a lot of people in the UK still didn't even know that this was coming back. That makes me worried for the quality. Well, it could go two ways. The quality of people that they will cast may be down because a lot of people didn't even know that they could apply for the show. But the counter argument would be the people who did apply may be super fans, maybe people who are they're into the online Survivor world. They knew as soon as Inside Survivor dropped that Survivor UK was going to come back, where to go, where to apply. It can go one or two ways. We could be in a space where there's a lot of super fans playing this first season, or the opposite could happen where we just have random people making it onto the show and the quality wasn't there because enough people didn't apply. Would you agree with that, Bandit?
100%. Like, I only learned about the application forms through, as you said, Survivor or Inside Survivor. I didn't learn it through any official media outlets. It's only when I hit the link that I learned, oh, this is on like an official media outlet. Like, I might as well check it out. But I think it's going to be interesting, as you said, comparing super fans. Like, you could have got it down to super fans that are really looking for the application and are super willing to apply. Or you could have someone that is just stumbling around social reality TV shows and they say, oh, there's Survivor. I've heard of that before. Let me go apply. Because as you know, Chris, you have to be super prepared for Survivor. It's not a show that you can just half-ass and just hope to get on, and then suddenly you're out there starving and you didn't realize you'd be starving out there with no food. It's something you have to prepare for a lot physically and mentally before you go out on the show. So I'll bring it up later on, but there is a few concerns potentially about the cast coming up with it being the first season.
Okay, well, that makes me very concerned because we had some issues with the Challenge UK recently as well, where the Challenge UK, half of the cast quit, on the show. And that makes me very concerned when you bring these comments up that there may be some rumors out there of people that would quit the show because they're struggling with the conditions, they're struggling with the fact that they can't eat, they can't hang. Is that kind of what you're sort of insinuating with those comments? Because that's kind of what it sounds like it's leaning that way for me.
So let me tell you, the UK, it can be encapsulated with one word, Chris.
Yeah.
Rain. We get a lot of rain here in the UK. And when you take individuals that are used to those rainy days, lower temperatures, and you bring them to the Dominican Republic, where it's 30 degrees every single day, very hot conditions. I believe Survivor I think it's Romania. They did a season specifically within this Dominican Republic.
So a couple. I've actually done my homework on this. So Dominican Republic. So the UK, from what I could see, apparently there's been a few versions of the show there, but you've had Survivor Romania, Survivor Croatia, Survivor Mexico, and Survivor Israel have all done seasons there. So when I saw that, it brought a little bit of relief to me, where it was like, it's not an untested battleground. Like, they've done stuff there. There may be some equipment that was previously left there, or people that other shows have worked with that they can use to actually build the challenges and everything that we're going to be seeing out there. So it gave me a little bit of comfort, but I didn't think of it out of a UK perspective. Like I said, I lived there for 2 years. I know that when I lived in London, whenever the weather got to like 28 degrees, people were complaining. And they were like,
25 degrees here and we're having a meltdown. Like, it's on the news. Like, that's newsworthy. You live in Australia, Chris. Like, 25 degrees. It's like, let me get on a sweater because, oh my goodness, I'm not used to these temperatures.
It's a mild day. It's not anything to write home about. This is what I would say. But I didn't even think of that as a possibility. I'm going to read a few more comments here as we go through, because there is more comments coming in. Gabe is saying, Jules seems very energetic. A game host, that's something very different from other hosts that we've seen. Yep, very happy with that. Andre Lee, welcome back to the live stream. Said, OMG, Bandit Survivor is here. Yes, he is. We finally got to make the collab, and so far it's been a lot of fun. And Andre's also saying, please not a Bears Grylls men versus women season for Survivor UK.
I know what they're referring to.
Enlighten me, because I don't actually know.
So there is a Bear Grylls format where they put men on one island and women on another one. And
his own reality TV. I've seen something about that. Yeah.
Yes, I think you might see like some memes on YouTube about it. But basically, quite a lot of the women, they were like quitting, or they were really struggling to get water and supplies. And there's been talks about how it was sort of rigged for the women's tribe that were like struggling, how they put like pigs out on the island for them to get, whereas the men, they had to hunt like alligators, and the women were always stumbling across like
Hunt
all these
alligators.
supplies that just happened to wash up on the show. So hopefully we don't get there in Survivor UK territory. Hopefully just these magical supplies don't wash up on shore.
Jeez, if I had to hunt alligators, I'd quit the show as well.
Yeah.
The first alligator I see, I'm like,
I'll send it
I'm
to you
out.
afterwards. Like, it's crazy how they managed to get it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of men versus women seasons or anything like that. Just, we're past that. Surely we're past putting men
100%.
versus women on a show, Andrea is saying also, and please easy on the UK celebs for the Survivor UK reboot. We addressed that in the beginning of the live. We're hoping that there isn't many celebs on this. The Fairy Tiger says, I really hope that the UK cast mostly people that actually know the game, so it's another super naive season 1 of a new series. And what I will say, and I think we as a super fan community need to really get behind Survivor UK and understand that Survivor UK is now at the beginning stage of a reboot. And let's keep our expectations in check, because to expect that the show is going to be like the Survivor US show is now 40 plus seasons in, or Australian Survivor is about 10 seasons in, that is an unrealistic expectation to put on a new show. And I think that I'm not saying we shouldn't have standards, but I really feel like there should be a lot of positivity being pushed out there to get the show off its feet, for there to be a couple of seasons into the future. So I'm a little bit worried about the weight of expectation that's going to come with doing a show such as Survivor over there.
100%. Like, I feel like you take modern Survivor 44, where people are literally making puzzles and 3D printing them at home before they even going out and flying out. You think about Australian Survivor heroes versus villains, where obviously we've got contestants like George that are some of the best strategic thinkers in the format. Survivor South Africa, like we've had all these all-star seasons now. Survivor South Africa has had Return of the Outcast. We've had Australian Survivor that's had heroes versus villains, and the gameplay might not be up to that standard because it's the first season. So try and think about it from the perspective of like Survivor Australia 2016, the gameplay that season, or Survivor South Africa Philippines, which is one of my favorite seasons, probably my favorite international season. So kind of think about it from that perspective. That's the gameplay we're getting. But I do agree that, we shouldn't have these super high expectations for the contestants. And just enjoy the show as a reality TV format. Again, it is a show that's primarily there for entertainment. And then if there's strategy and there's good strategy, well, then that's a bonus from my perspective.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Gabe here says UK players expect to get sunburned like Cochrane. Andrea Lee is having a chuckle at that. And then we've got Will saying the show is only as good as the characters they cast. We agree 100%. That's what makes or breaks a season for me. The best seasons, the seasons I always remember, are the ones with the best characters.
What is your favorite season, Chris?
So what's the funny thing? I'm not a big rewatcher when it comes to shows. I don't like going back and rewatching stuff that I've already seen. It seems like a waste of time when I can experience something new, But the seasons that if somebody asked me today, which seasons would you rewatch without thinking twice? It would be Kage-yan. It would be Tocantins. It would be David versus Goliath, and Heroes versus Villains. Those would be the first seasons that come to mind for seasons that I would say, if you told me, let's rewatch the season today, I'd be like, I'll watch all of those. And all of them had big characters.
And if you think about it, there's a lot of discussion in modern Survivor now about how they should be casting more normal people. And obviously we had chats here about, let's hope that there isn't too many celebrities. But if you think about Kage-yan, if you think about David versus Goliath, they had some pretty big celebrities on that season. Yeah, David in the Brains tribe. They had Cliff Robinson and the Braun tribe. David versus Goliath, obviously with Mike White, with Johnny Mundo. But you think about what puts those celebrities apart from potentially other celebrities that we've seen on Survivor, where they had an understanding and a respect for the game, and that they were entertaining personalities. So it's not saying if you're a celebrity, you can't be on Survivor and you don't fit on Survivor. But I think it'd be quite interesting to see how they decide to do the casting going forward, and kind of having individuals that have at least a foundation and respect for the game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you've agreed,
no, I agree 100% with you. And I'm also a big fan of Nicaragua. I know a lot of people don't like it. And it's also a season full of recruits. And I don't mind people that are stumbling their way through the game, making dumb moves. I find it hilarious at times, to be honest with you, and it's entertaining to watch.
That's why Survivor SA6 is so fun. Like, it's just some people just don't have an understanding of the game, and it can be fun still. So, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it created some scenarios that we've never seen in Survivor history, and it was an unpredictable season, which was fun to watch. Gabriel says, I hope we get one fan out there like Phoebe, Nick in season 1 Australia. You're forgetting Christy Bennett. I still think, by the way, we're doing a most underrated Australian Survivor players next. We did our top 5 not that long ago here on the channel, so go check that out if you ever wonder. And the reason I did it, Bandit, is because every time I do a live for a new season of Australian Survivor, people jump on and they ask, who's your top 5 players? Well, guess what? We've now done a live. Go check it out. We've got our top 5 players. Christy Bennett, for me, a little bit of a sneak preview for those that will tune in the future, is very likely to be in my top 5 most underrated players of Australian Survivor, because I don't feel like she gets the credit that she deserves. We don't even mention her as a big fan of this show, and she was a massive fan of the show. The reason she won the show was because she knew how to approach the final jury, and had one of the best performances we've seen in any franchise.
I agree, yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, but I do agree with the commenter here. I hope we get a fan or two on there, and if we don't, we should blame Bandit Survivor for not applying.
I did apply, but I just didn't get in.
I didn't apply. Okay, we should blame the producers.
Yes,
for not putting
don't blame me.
Don't bring 8 bandits away. Don't. Sandy is saying, yes, I kind of want the cast of people who don't know anything about Survivor, but down to the format elements, because it would be fresh compared to the US Survivor. One thing I wonder, do you think there's a chance that they would have given these players, before they went out there, Australian Survivor to watch or Survivor US to watch? Because I feel like if I was running a show like Survivor and this was going to be the first season that was going to go out there and no one knows what to compare it to in the UK, I would get some, I'd get my hands on a couple of legal copies of the show. And I was like, I'd let them watch it to get an idea of what Survivor is about and what can be done.
So I think the contestants, when they apply, they're recommended from that point on, if they're in the interview process, to watch Survivor and get an understanding. But I think even in Ponderosa, they might have access to past Survivor seasons from like Survivor US and stuff. So hopefully that translates over to Survivor UK, where they're actively pushing like the Survivor format. And I think it'll be interesting. What's your take on it, Chris?
In regards to what they'll do with the format?
Like, should they be showing contestants Survivor footage? And if so, what stage of the process?
Yeah, I think they should. I think that as soon as a person is in the casting process and they've confirmed that they'll be on the show, they should provide them with a list and say, I want you to watch Kage Yan. I want you to watch like whatever seasons it is, Champions versus Contenders 2 or All-Stars in Australia, seasons with great gameplay, with big characters. I want you to watch some of these seasons to try and promote them to go out there and actually play an active game, because then we do have a lesser risk of people going out there and not knowing what the hell's going on. And I do think that Survivor South Africa does it, by the way. I'm pretty sure Survivor South Africa has done it in the past. Rob Bentele, who came on to play one of the best international games we've ever seen, wasn't the biggest fan, but got his hands on some Survivor content before he went out there.
And I was actually surprised how much they've tied it into Australian Survivor. Like, obviously the initial trailer had footage from it. There's elements of Survivor UK that can be tied into Australian Survivor, like the very physical challenges that we're seeing. So that could also mean that we're going to be getting a bit more camp life and a bit more like of the contestants struggling, because it seems to be a bit more of a physical season. But I think that I agree, I 100% agree with you about how they should be telling the contestants about Survivor and getting them involved as soon as possible. I know from the application process, quite a few of the questions were them asking about like their Survivor gameplay and about how they'll cope with like the island life. So they definitely tried to get people in the perspective of thinking already about Survivor and about their gameplay strategy. So I think that's a bit of a benefit of the format that they had coming into even the application process, is that they're already trying to make people think about Survivor and about their gameplay.
Yeah, that sounds positive to me. I think that they have to do something like that just to get people up to speed. And again, like we spoke about, that expectation of fans coming into this, that they're going to expect a certain level of gameplay, which may be unfair of a series that is just starting out now in the UK. But fingers crossed that we will see that. Let's have a look here at more of the comments coming in. I'm not too sure if I've read this one yet, but Sandy says, yes, I kind of want the cast, people who don't know anything about Survivor, but okay, we've seen that one. Charlotte, welcome back to the live stream. Charlotte's from the UK as well. She says the fact that the trailer dropped during Wimbledon final bodes well for advertisement, because obviously if you can get it on a Wimbledon slot, you would be paying some big moolah for that, Bandit, so that might be positive.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, is that it's a very good advertising move. Even at the end of the Survivor UK trailer, they were tying it into the Wimbledon final. And I feel like it's a good advertising approach to be able to put it on something as big as that and be able to promote it. So hopefully they continue going forward, being able to get more of those advertisement trailers out there, connecting it to bigger events and trying to push the show.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very, that's a great comment. I didn't know that, Charlotte. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Fairy Tiger Wolf here says, expect plenty of dry humor on the show for sure. Yeah, because obviously that's what the UK is known for, some great dry humor. Gabe says, Bandit, any aspects of UK society non-UK viewers should expect on the show, like mateship in Australia?
That was a bit of a worry coming into the UK, is also like Australia. The UK has this sort of mateship mentality. Like there's some people in the UK that they finish every sentence with the word mate. Like, oh, I love you, mate. I'll see you later, mate. Have a good day, mate. And you know, like they'll go on their way.
I'm guilty of that. It's rubbed off on me over here in New Zealand and Australia as well, you know.
But it'll be interesting how that impacts it. And as one of the other commenters said, I think there's going to be a lot more dry humor. It might be a bit more of a humorous show. I know, like our Love Island here compared to like Australia, it's got a lot more like humor based and a lot more like klutzy moments. So right. I think that might be a bit more of like a different approach.
Did you watch Traders UK at all? Have you dove into the Traders sort of reality TV stuff that's out there?
I haven't watched the show, but I've done like some like background research about it.
Yeah, so I watched Traders UK when I was flying over to the US earlier this year because they had it on the plane. So I was like, you know, I've never watched it. I might as well just, I've got a 12-hour flight. I might as well just binge through most of the season. And one of the things that stood out for me there was a real reluctance to backstab and, you know, play the game actively in Traders UK. That and also a bit of sulking by contestants when people did it, which to me was very off-putting. And I'm hoping that that's not something that translates over to something like Survivor UK as well.
That's also another aspect of the UK, is that like as a country or as a collective of countries, we're quite grumpy. So maybe if something doesn't go our way, especially, you know, when you're starving on an island, we could see some anger and some outbursts, which could be good for the show entertainment wise. But, you know, if it's repetitive, it could get a little bit greater.
As long as we have someone on the sideline laughing at the person being grumpy. Like, you know, saying as they're out here in the elements, struggling and getting weaker, I'm getting stronger. You know, I'm becoming a better player, and they're taking their foot off the gas. As long as there's someone that can bring that type of energy, I think it'll balance out.
I know, yeah, and it'll be interesting how like diverse the casting is, like how many different perspectives they're bringing in. Like, are they going to be bringing in someone that's like a Courtney Yates is going to be sort of like having their little jabs, like a Tyson that's just going to straight up roast you to your face. So that'll be interesting how diverse the casting is.
Yeah. So this one here from Andre Lee, I'm lost, Andre. You've stumped me, but hopefully Bandit Survivor knows who you're talking about here. He says Kim Woodburn or Lady C for Survivor UK. Do you know who those people are?
I think they're the winners. Let me see.
All right. I actually had on Instagram one of the winners, and I should remember their name because it's been a while now. It's probably about a year ago. One of the winners of Survivor UK actually followed me because obviously I follow some of the UK, like not UK, some of the Survivor players internationally, and I got to follow back. It might be Kim. It might that rings a bell for some other reason. Here Andre says Celebrity Big Brother and Celebrity Get Me Out of Here.
I knew they were the winner or something. Fair enough. See, I've only done like background research into it, but UK is
that's a great comment. We'll say UK is as grumpy as Rodney doing dishes on his bed.
And you know what? You're not wrong.
And you know what? Like, listen, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of Rodney's personal life as it stands currently, but on the show, he was pure entertainment. And I know, yeah. I am so shocked that they've never brought Rodney back, you know, to our screens, because I found him hilarious. It was fun to see him play the game, and he was not a bad player. But I think people tend to forget that because a lot of people were really put off by just who he was as a person out there, which I found entertainment in it.
That's an interesting thing, because I always feel like if viewers are a bit graded by a contestant on the show, they'll forget how good they were strategically. Like Rodney, if he beats Carolyn in fire making, he gets 3 votes, doesn't he? At the end, he could almost win the game. So
yeah, here's a legitimate chance if he did.
100%.
I did want to talk a little bit about the format, what we know so far. Obviously, you've mentioned the Dominican Republic already. We've spoken about that. It's going to be 16 episodes and 20 players. So all up, it sounds like if it's 20 players, it'll be 2 tribes, right?
I think it was originally going to be 18 contestants, but I think it's now down to 18.
Oh, so they've gone down to 18.
Yeah, I believe so. I think on older articles it said 20. I think it might be 18 now, which is quite interesting. If you think about it, the start of Survivor Australia,
could be tribes of 6 even in an 18, but I don't think they'll do anything too fancy. It was actually quite interesting that Australian Survivor in its reboot had 3 tribes in the start, which is very
so Survivor UK is coming in with two tribes. 2 different tribes, which is good, because obviously it could have the potential of 3 tribes to 6, which I think we're getting a little bit tired of as Survivor super fans.
100%. I prefer the 2 tribe format.
Exactly. I think there's more options, and it's good to see that they're keeping with 2 tribes. But obviously, it's going to be the first season of Survivor. So a really interesting point is that, you think about Survivor Australia, how it came back, and Survivor South Africa season 6, and there were quits on those seasons because people weren't super expecting the conditions. And as we talked about earlier on, about how, you're going to come from the UK and you're going to the Dominican Republic, which is in the Caribbean, and it could be very different for contestants. I believe there's someone was telling me that the mosquito levels in the Dominican Republic are similar to the levels in Marquesas that the contestants had to go through.
Wow.
So some of the conditions could be quite rough as well for the contestants. So it is always a worry.
We just lost you there for a second. You're back now. I think it's as your phone got a text that probably just cut you off for a second.
Oh, yes, no problem. So the mosquito levels are similar to Marquesas from what people have been telling me. So it could be a little bit of a worry that, there could be more quits like we see in the reboots of these first Australian Survivor seasons or South Africa seasons back, and how they kind of handle it, because they do have 16 episodes to fill. You think about Survivor US, they have 13 episodes with an 18-person cast. So it'll be quite interesting.
I hate quits, obviously, but I think it's also expected with the show being new. Like we said, a lot of people didn't even know that casting was happening. So I would assume that some people got headhunted by the casting crew, and they were stalking certain people's Instagram and saying, oh, they look like they've got 500,000 people and they're a fitness influencer. Let's get them to come and do the show. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of stunt casting choices that we're going to see. And those people are going to come into the show with the mentality. We actually had it even recently on $1 Million Island, Australia, where some people afterwards legitimately thought the show would get paused and that they would go to a hotel. And they had to realize, oh, no, shit, we're actually living out here with the food that we have, and we've got to go scavenge for food. So there might be people coming into the show that are that naive that they think that the show isn't real, that it's fake,
Exactly.
And then they get there and it's like, oh, shit, this is a real thing.
And it's completely different to any other reality TV show where you're literally on an island, starving, having to work hard to get food. Whereas in these other shows, like Love Island, for example, they have all these designated meals and they come in and it's pre-prepared for them, and then they relax in a villa. So it's extremely different to any of these other shows that we're currently seeing. So there could be an issue that someone that is just surfing through all these reality TV shows trying to get an application in, we could see them on the show, and then they could be like, oh, I didn't realize that, I'm going to be struggling out here.
Yeah, Gabe saying, got to anticipate a recruit who had no idea what Survivor is and that quits. And I do want to say, it's not like we don't lose people even in today's age of Survivor that isn't due to game-related things specifically. We just had people removed medically from the last season. 2 players were medically removed. We had a player medically removed from Australian Survivor recently. So these things do still happen. Now, it's never fun to see people leave the game for non-game reasons. And I'm sure it makes production's life very difficult, and they will be challenged in regards to what to do when this happens. Because with Survivor US, they've been around for so long. I'm sure they just roll on with it and get into whatever needs to happen next. Australian Survivor's got a format where they have to have a certain amount of episodes out there. So there's non-elimination episodes, which makes it easier to hide the fact that somebody has been medically evacuated from the game. But in the case of Survivor UK being 16 episodes, that's closer to traditional Survivor when it first started. There may be a little bit less leeway, and we may have to see a non-elimination episode at some point, which is not going to be fun because I don't like them, but it would be for good reason.
Yeah, that's the thing as well, is like there's a lot of episodes, so it could be quite tight. If someone does, as you say, quit or get medically evacuated, we could see a non-elimination round, and it's how they implement that into the format then, because Australian Survivor, as you say, it's such a long format that there's some leeway there. Like they could have a day or two where they have to decide, okay, right, well, we'll actually set this up. It was supposed to be a challenge for immunity, but instead we'll set it up so that it's like a redemption challenge or whatever. And they have that leeway. Whereas I think Survivor UK is going to, have 18 contestants for 16 episodes. So they're going to have to try and implement it a lot more quicker and maybe more creative ways. If it does happen.
This next one that I wanted to touch on, and this is one that I'm a little bit doing selfishly for myself and probably for a lot of the people, the audience of this channel. Most of us are not in the UK, right? And there is a slight chance that production may come and listen to this podcast if it comes across their radar and they see, oh, somebody's talking about the UK before it's even out there. Let's see what people are saying. There's that slight chance, 1 out of 100. And if they're listening to this, I would like for them to consider putting some of this out there for international audiences to enjoy. I feel like this is a mistake that Survivor as a whole has made as a brand. I know it's owned by the same company, Endemol Shine, I believe, owns all of it. And for some other reason, they make it very difficult for people from across the world to follow Survivor, and it forces people to watch the show in non-legal manners, which does not help with the growth of the show or getting legitimate viewership on there. Survivor fans are crafty. They're going to find a way to get around any of the geo blocks and the things that you guys are putting out there. So please consider putting this out there for international audiences. Survivor US, not Survivor US, Survivor Australia and Survivor South Africa have got this collaboration now where they show each other's shows in these countries. Can the UK do that? Do you think there is an appetite for it? Are you optimistic that they will think about the international audience? Because Survivor is an international show. It doesn't belong to one country. It is a global phenomenon, in my opinion.
I am really hoping that they implement a way, particularly from the US, because it has a massive following in the US, where obviously we've had 44 seasons there. I'm optimistic that they'll do it because I feel like it's the best approach, as you say. Like if someone is a big Survivor fan and they want to watch Survivor UK, there's 2 ways that they can do it. They can either go it through ordinary means where they're actively contributing as a viewer towards the figures, towards
which we all want to do.
Yeah, towards the legitimate means for the show, whether that be online streaming or maybe checking it out on their TV if they're able to watch it that way. Or else they're going to check it out illegally and they're not going to be contributing towards the ratings and going into the show directly. So I think as TV producers, you have the choice of basically these super fans that are going to watch it no matter what, because I can tell you probably 5 different ways to watch Survivor US that don't contribute towards their ratings. I'm just saying, but you can either decide, okay, we want the ratings, we might as well take them in and go through that little bit of extra effort. And, you'll have the payoff of having extra viewership and extra benefit, or else you can just have those viewers go somewhere else and watch it on like a Google file that someone else managed to capture.
Well, we live in an age now where everything is going digital, and there's this whole thing where for the longest period of time, people have said that Survivor US is on a decline. It's the easier argument to make because the show, the quality isn't like we remember it, and things are changing. And they quote the numbers, the viewership numbers in the US quite often and say, well, back in the day, it had 20, 30, 40 million people watching it. Now they've got 6, 7, or 8, right? But that's a lazy argument when you think about that. Like, do I think that the same amount of people are still watching it? First, let me just put that to rest. No, there has been a drop. But I do think that that figure is inflated by the fact that a lot of people watch the show digitally now. So for the BBC, there is a real opportunity to put it onto their digital platform. Like have it on the TV show, but similar to what Australia is doing, they have 10 play where they put all the episodes on 10 play after it's shown on Channel 10, but they still geo block it So people have to use VPNs and stuff. Luckily, there is a way to do it and to still legally show it. But why put a geo block on a show that you know is going to bring viewership to those platforms? And you can go and post your own advertisements on there. So you still get revenue from it, but you get revenue from a global audience. It makes no sense to me, Bandit.
And every article I see from the production team, from Joel, who's the Dom himself, they recognize that it's a big worldwide phenomena, Survivor, and that there's going to be individuals that are going to be interested from all over the world. They obviously realize that it's a big task and an undertaking to have a region's own Survivor. So hopefully they are able to work out something, whether that be with yourselves, like from South Africa and Australia, or Survivor US. There's some way that can work it out. The UK hasn't notoriously been very good at being able to get people from outside of the UK watching their content. Hopefully this...
Just lost you there for a second again.
Sorry.
Text is coming in, so I'm going to have to wait a few seconds for you to come back because you had a really good point. So it's 2 texts coming in. I definitely want to hear what Bandit is saying here at the moment because it sounds like he had a really interesting take there on what the UK is not well known for in general.
Am I good?
You're good.
Oh, right. Okay,
so
sorry.
Repeat that part about the UK is not really good at.
Okay, so the UK, it's not really historically good at having people from outside the UK come in and tune into the content. Because like through most of their shows, but hopefully this being part of a franchise and with a lot of countries having their own versions of Survivor, they can have that sort of viability to bring in other people and make some deal happen.
Yeah, listen, I'm very, very hopeful, and I think this is the appropriate part for me to ask you: do you think the UK Survivor, the title here is, will it flop or will it succeed? Where do you lie in the equation there? Are you over or under on the chances of this thing taking off there in the UK and for it to be a success?
From what I've seen from articles from the production team, from the host Joel himself, they have a very good understanding of what the show, I think, wants and what it will entail. And they're coming in from the perspective of trying to make a very good season that can last for years and years and years, as you say. As one of the commenters said, I think at this point, it really depends on the cast, because from what I've seen, it seems like, you're sort of like middle school Survivor sort of seasons where I don't think there's going to be too many crazy advantages. Fingers crossed. I don't think there's going to be the super wacky theme. I think it's just going to be a bit more standard, which I think is very fair. I think they're going to be playing it a little bit more safe, and it's going to be down to the cast to determine how they're going to play with the theme, really.
Listen, people in the US have watched the show for 40 plus seasons and they struggle to keep up with what's going on in the US because the game's constantly changing. You think you're playing the game in a certain format, and then in the next episode, suddenly the thing that gave you safety last round now is the reason you're going to go home. So I don't think that they're going to do that to the UK people out there, because these are people that still need to be introduced to the show and need to get behind it. I believe in the KISS principles when it comes to Survivor. Keep it simple, stupid, because when you do that, you allow people to play the game.
And do you think about the 2 most recent seasons of Survivor that we've had one in the US and one in Survivor Australia? They were Survivor 44 and Survivor Heroes versus Villains, where there was a lot of criticism about the advantages, about how you had to basically follow a notepad and pen to be able to record who had what.
Yeah,
in Survivor 44, they're now handing out fake idols, 3 fake idols, 1 for each tribe. So by episode 3, we technically had 9 advantages circulating. So I feel like the best thing that Survivor UK can do is just have the sort of middle school Survivor season that we've seen in 2010s, where it's not as advantage orientated, and that we're just getting sort of standard Survivor in an era where things like Survivor US are starting to pull away from what made Survivor unique and sort of introducing more advantages and all these crazy twists because they feel like they need to modernize the show.
All right, Bandit, as we're getting closer to the end here of the stream, I want to ask you, is there anything you expected me to ask? Is there anything we didn't touch on that you feel like we should have touched on? We've touched on the host. To recap for people that are only tuning into the live very late, we spoke about the host's credentials. I think the host is one of the superstars coming into this thing, and definitely I'm in favor of Joel making a success out of this for various reasons. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, go back to the beginning of the podcast where we spoke about that in depth. We spoke about his credentials, and we spoke a little bit about, how we think the show will compare to other reality shows currently on the market. We dove into that. We spoke about the BBC being the main channel that is going to broadcast it and how we think they'll fare. Will they put the marketing behind it and so forth? And then we also spoke a little bit about why it didn't work previously with ITV, potentially. And then we spoke about the format, where it's going to be held. And then lastly, we spoke about the international audience. Do you feel like we've missed anything? Is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
I guess my thing is, do you think that Survivor UK would benefit from having a theme, like heroes versus villains, or like what other themes we had, like even like a remote island, or Diva versus Goliath, or champions versus contenders? Or do you think they should just play it safe and have no theme and kind of keep it as this more bare bones theme for the start of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm actually at the point now in Survivor US where I'm missing the themes. And my whole theory is that when we look back, if Survivor goes beyond season 50 and we get to like season 56, will we really remember season 42 and what happened there? Because there is nothing that really pulls your memory back to it. It doesn't really stand out. A lot of season 41, 42, 43, 44 all seem like the same show to me, and like one big season. So I'm a big fan of themes and wanting themes back in the US. I like themes over in Australia, but I do think when you're doing your first season, maybe your first 1 or 2 seasons can just be Survivor season 1 or season 2 on its own, so that people can get used to what this is. Maybe putting a theme on top of the game itself is a little bit too much for a new school fan of the show to comprehend. And they'll be like, well, what do they mean, David versus Goliath? Why are they putting people out there that are like people who've achieved a lot and people who haven't? Like, this doesn't make sense. Why are they putting them out there on an island to survive? So I feel like for the first season, I'm more so in favor of it not being a theme. But I do think that if they get successful enough to go to a season 3, 4, and 5, maybe then you start looking at themes similar to what Australia did.
I 100% agree. As you say, and I think even a commenter in the comments section, they were saying that there's these survival shows where you're putting men against women, or you're putting people from these archetypes against each other. And the standard viewer, if they see that, they're going to think about that being just a survival show and another one of those versions, rather than it being Survivor. And they're like, okay, well, what's Survivor? They're not really giving us any more information. And as you say, starting to integrate then in more themes to make the gameplay more dynamic and sort of diversify at least the start and the marooning of the game and make it a bit more interesting.
Well, we've got contrasting views here with the audience. Gabe is saying that it needs to get its feet wet before it starts using themes like Australian Survivor. Mm-hmm. And then Andre is saying for a reboot, it will work better with a theme. I'm worried that a lot of people who watched the first Survivor 10 years ago and it doesn't sound like there were many of them, maybe a lot of them won't watch the new show, or, there's this whole new, they can't rely on the few people that watch the first 2 seasons. They have to bring new audience in to this. That's I'm worried about it, and if you do have a theme, my biggest thing is I think Australian Survivor is also missing a massive opportunity. Like, the next season is rumored to be Titans versus Rebels, which to me sounds like champions versus contenders, David versus Goliath. It seems like something we've done before.
Done again, yeah.
And I feel like they're missing an opportunity to bring an authentic Australian theme to the show. That to me would get more people engaged. Like, if you had to make it state of origin Survivor theme, where it's because there's this massive rugby league where all of Queensland takes on New South Wales, and that's a big thing. And I'm just using that as an example. It doesn't have to be that. But I feel like you need an authentic Australian theme or an authentic UK theme to really get people to take notice of that.
And you brought up a really good point, where there's going to be individuals from the UK that have never seen Survivor. They're going to be like me, maybe slightly younger, where they were born maybe when Survivor was just coming out, or maybe even after Survivor UK came out. And they're not going to have any idea, so they sort of need a little bit more of a baseline season just to get integrated into the show. But you also think about the people 20 years ago that were watching Survivor UK, and they realize that it's back. If the show is vastly different than what they've experienced, they're just not going to watch it. They don't want to, watch the show that they loved, and then every 2 minutes there's a new advantage coming up. So I think it's also beneficial for those people that haven't watched since 20 seasons ago, or 20 years ago, excuse me, to be able to come back now and see a show that has changed a little bit with the modern time, of course, but is still inherently the same show.
Yeah, I like what Will brought up here, saying use a theme when it's an all-star season, use the location when it's a newbie season. Now, the reason we've moved away and we started coming up with all these wacky themes, even over in the US, was because they got lazy and wanted to do cost saving, and they stopped moving around because all of these seasons is in Fiji. And we didn't really say this, but I've recently been to the Bahamas. I've recently been to the Caribbean. It's beautiful there. I wasn't that far away from the Dominican Republic, so we're gonna have just visually a very different experience with this show, because to me it has become mundane seeing Fiji over and over. And it's not even like I go in there to hate on Fiji, because I've been to Fiji as well. It's a beautiful place. It's just you get worn down by seeing the same beach, by seeing the same backdrop the whole time. And I'm really excited that they did go somewhere that's different, and they didn't just choose to go to Samoa, Fiji.
100%. And you even, like, I've seen comments online about people that within the very first episode of a new Survivor US season, they're able to pick out the islands and every single tribe that has been on that island before. They can say, oh, like the edge of extinction, this used to be this island in another season. So it does become a little bit repetitive, even from a geographical sense, just because you're seeing the exact same things over and over again. And it'll be interesting if the UK decides to set up its base in the Dominican Republic, or maybe, as one of the commenters said, expand and try out new locations, use that as their season theme, and then once All Stars happens, makes that the theme and less away from the show or the location on the show.
The Theory Tiger here says, thank you for covering the UK Survivor. Hopefully it's going to be awesome. Theory Tiger, thank you so much for dropping in. It's been great having you here. Gabe says, any old fun theme Bandit thinks UK could use, or a new unique one? So is there any themes, I'm assuming, that Survivor has used already that you think would translate well to Survivor UK? And it could be one that you love personally, or it could be one you think will translate well. And then is there a new unique theme that you think should make its way to the UK?
So I think that for an easy theme that Survivor seasons can use is just brains versus brawns. You can even add in a third tribe. That's just something that a lot of casual viewers are going to understand the premise of.
Yeah, we all want beauty. Like, I mean, come on. Like, you got to get some beautiful people out there as well. Like, why does Australia have to? We always used to have the running joke where we said everybody in Australia is beautiful. They don't need a beauty tribe,
Yeah. But that's just an interesting theme, because it's not really lopsided, like, as you say, champions versus contenders or David versus Goliath, or these overdog versus underdog themes where the Goliaths are sort of supposed to win more than often. And brains versus bronze feels a lot more even, where obviously the contestants have their own strengths and they're playing against each other, while it's not something like men versus women, where
unless it's Australian Survivor, where it doesn't require brains in like 80% of the challenges, but it requires brains.
That was one of my criticisms, was like, why would you have like a brains tribe on Australian Survivor when like all the challenges are physical based?
Brawn, endurance, like very minimal puzzles, like, if they do include them. I'm throwing shade. I still love Australian Survivor, even though I'm throwing a little bit of shade,
Even the puzzles that season like require brawn. Like they brought out like the most like brawn based puzzles, but it still was a fun season. I love Haley and George, but
so any new unique themes that you think will work well in the UK? Sorry, I took you completely off track there.
Oh, no, you're all good. So I think something that they can do in a few years' time is Gen Z, bring in some Gen Z contestants, do like Generation X versus Millennials, but just with the new era. I think it'd be quite interesting to see the dynamics.
Only if they have Eminem in the old tribe. Did you hear the shots he fired this last week at Gen Z?
Just bring them
lyrically
over,
and figuratively,
just to see how he goes up against Gen Z.
So Gen Z versus who would be Millennials versus Gen Z would be the season.
Yeah, it would be Millennials versus Gen Z then, which is crazy when you think about like Africa.
I'm a millennial, man. I'm getting on now, like, so I'll be in that category. So it'll be fun. I do think at some point, and I know we're getting sort of towards the end of this podcast, and we're getting a little bit off track. But I do, at some point, I'd love to see a season or one of the franchises take a season. Obviously, we want the international crossover happening beyond anything else, right? So if the UK can get 2 or 3 seasons under their belt, and if they have a couple of big characters, then hopefully in the future we see some of the best of the UK go up against South Africa and Australia and the US. That would be after Winners at War, that's the next dream scenario for me as a fan, right?
What version Survivor do you think would do that international theme where it's potentially UK versus South Africa versus Australia versus US? Who would be most willing?
So I'm very fortunate that I've met Leroux Botha in real life, and I've had lunch with him before. He's obviously, for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody does, he's the creative producer for Survivor South Africa. And I brought up the international theme to him, obviously, as I should. You know, you get the opportunity to speak to the man himself. And it's on his radar. So, like, that's why Survivor South Africa, I really hope they do pick it back up, because it doesn't have a home. Mnet has decided not to continue on, as far as we know. Like, this could still change, but that's the news that I'm hearing. That's what's out there. But I also know that there are potential in other avenues. There's a lot of streaming platforms out there that know the value of Survivor. And I think Survivor South Africa, in my opinion, is being held back by Mnet. Like, if it went to a streaming platform like Netflix or something big, like, it would blow up in my mind. If it's the first one to do so, because it's watched by so many people around the world. So I do hope Survivor South Africa does get more seasons, because I do think that they would do it. When they would do it, I'm not too sure, but I know it's on Leroux's radar. I know that Australian Survivor would also, like, I can see Will bringing up here, like, I firmly believe, Will, that it's like, where does Australian Survivor go next? It's had an all-star season. It's had heroes versus villains. What's the next big season? You know, in my opinion,
it's Survivor US contestants on, so
it has. So what's the next big theme that they can take on? It's international worlds collide. Like, you have to do it at some point. My fear is that the UK Survivor is the baby in the equation, and they need to get 1 or 2 seasons under their belt, because they're not a part of the Survivor Australia South Africa alliance right now. But them showing the show on both sides, again, 10 players introducing the Australian audience to Chappies, to Santoni, to Dante, to, you know, all these players that people in Australia, that they kind of know who they are. So I do think that there is a chance that Australian Survivor could do it as well. One thing I am certain of is that Survivor US, they're not in touch with the fans enough to do it. Like, I heard Jeff speak about this on his podcast once, where he was like, yeah, but we thought about bringing international survivors in, but, you know, then we thought it wouldn't translate to the US audience, and, you know, they might not understand them because not all of them speak English. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Survivor South Africa is English. Australian Survivor is English. Like, you know, and put subtitles now. I mean, we all had to suffer through Big Tom. Surely they can suffer through, you know, some Aussie accents and South African accents.
And, like, if you think about it, I might be wrong, but Australian Survivor, wasn't it Emmy nominated for Heroes versus Villains, or it had some sort of considerable nomination?
It got, I forgot what I think it's called the Logie or something. Someone from Australia could tell me here. It's the Australian version of, like, an Emmy that it won. And South African Survivor has just been nominated for a SAFTA, which is like, or SAFA or something like that. It's like the same version for South Africa. And, like, the show is not being considered for another season, but it's potentially going to win an award. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how does that work? You know?
I know, but
I've got a few people coming in. I just quickly want to read a couple of comments here. So Fat Dad Slim in the comments saying, will the pomp spontaneously combust in the sun or in the beach? We spoke about that a little bit earlier. So if you go and listen to the earlier parts of it, we think there is a possibility without giving too much away. Will saying Australia would be the season to do it first. Gabe saying SA Survivor, I think, seems most game. Australian Survivor has power to get it done, though. US is too patriotic. They tried to make it in favor of the US players to win. I don't know if they'd make it in favor of the US players to win, but I just think that a lot of people have said, like, how would, like, a George do in Survivor US? And I feel like Survivor US has become too luck-based, and it takes a lot of the skill and gameplay from a player like George away from him. It's out of his control almost, because it's like Russian roulette sometimes in regards to going to the beach at the right time to get the right advantage.
100%. Like, obviously, you know, we'll be on live streams with Russell Muscle and Flynn talking about our winner rankings. But, like, I don't know if it was just me, but the Survivor 41 to 44 winners were so hard for me to rank, because it was like, okay, well, you know, like, these contestants, they just happened to be immune at the merge, and then they got on the right swap tribe. Like, what would have happened if they were swapped on the other tribe, or if they didn't get this advantage? It's, as you say, very hard, and it's almost a format that requires you to be in the right place at the right time to get further in the game.
Can't wait to talk about that because I'm similar to you on some of those winners. Fat Dad Slim here says Aussies love important entertainment. We would jump at it. Sandy says Paramount Plus can exploit this idea, but Paramount Plus is just as bad streaming platform regarding these ideas. Yeah, because Paramount Plus, throwing a little bit of shade, like, I feel like Eminem taking shots at everyone right now, Again, like we had Australian Survivor and Survivor US on Paramount Plus in the US for a couple of weeks. And then it got removed because people started tweeting online about the fact that they loved the format. And then suddenly people were giving all this praise to the two international formats. It got removed. And you've got to put two and two together to say Jeff felt threatened, because that's what I think. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but that's without them addressing it, you come up with like assumptions. And my assumption is that he felt threatened that people loved the other two formats on the show, and they were putting pressure on him to go back to a more traditional format. The one thing I've learned about Jeff is that Jeff wants to do it his way, and he does not want people to tell him how to do the show. He wants to make a show that he enjoys, and like he said on his podcast, that kids enjoy. That's the two most important audiences to him.
Like, if you think about it, like, there's so many talks about what could Survivor 50 be in the community. It could be legends. It could be all these contestants coming back. We might, for Survivor 50, on the basis of Jeff's podcast, have a half first boot season and a half runner-up season. That's what we could get for Survivor 50. No Survivor Legends or anything.
Doesn't make sense. Like half runner-up, half, I know we're completely off topic with what we were discussing, but half runner-up, half first boot doesn't make sense. Either do all first boots, right? Or do what Survivor South Africa did, pre-merge versus post-merge all-stars, or do runner-ups versus winners. Like, there has to be some beef. Like, but runner-ups versus first boots, that I don't know. Anyways, doesn't make sense to me. So Fat Dad Slim says Logie. Yep, so that's what I thought. Gab says easy translation, US super patriotic. They think audience would hate a chance of a non-US winner. Well, they've had two of them already, right? Who was the two Canadians? So it was Marianne and Erica, right? Back-to-back Canadian.
Yes.
So it's happened. They've had a taste of it. And then they removed Canadian players from the season following.
43, yeah. And then 44, I think we had like Kane, to be fair, but
yeah,
it's just so funny how instantly after 2 wins, they're just like, okay, I think we're done for Canadians for now.
Richard saying, don't worry, Chris, Jeff texted me that he's threatened. Yeah, you've got it on good authority, Richard. Gab saying, I'm scared Jeff holding out on All-Star season because he said he wants it to have an extension again, like Winners at War. Yeah, it's a lot of like maybe a different live show to talk about all the fears we have going forward for Survivor. But Sandy saying, yeah, 43 don't have any Canadians. Yep. All right, we've come to the end here of this live stream. We've gone on for quite a bit about Survivor UK for those that have popped in late. Spoke about a lot, so go back and listen to it. I think there was some good information. I hope so. I hope you found entertainment out of it. Bandit, tell people what's coming up on your channel. Where can they find you? All those kind of things. This is your opportunity to plug some stuff.
Oh, thank you, Chris. So obviously live streams aren't my bread and butter. I'm more so scripted. I do scripted content on my channel where I just kind of make jokes about Survivor and do like top 10 or top 5 breakdowns and sort of just ranking lists. I will have a video up on the channel next week involving Chris and quite a few other content creators for one of the bigger collaborations that the Survivor community has seen. So make sure to check that out. And I mainly just do commentary and like smaller videos, around 10 minutes to 20 minute style content. But it's been absolutely amazing to be on this live stream. So hopefully we can chat more about Survivor UK.
Yeah, 100%. Like, listen, I think I couldn't tell that this is not how you make your bread and butter. Like, you were smooth, smooth as butter today here on the live. And I really appreciate you taking the time, being flexible with when we could do this live as well. Really appreciate that. And hopefully this will not be the last time we get to see you here on the channel, as I am planning to cover Survivor UK on the channel. So who knows, we might get some more Bandit Survivor here on the channel as well.
And subscribe to us, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're working extremely hard here. So if this is the first time you've stumbled across this channel and you liked what we discussed here today, there's a lot of content coming to you in the coming weeks. We've just finished with $1 Million Island. We just started last night with Traitors New Zealand. We've got Traitors Australia content coming to you this week with the man, the myth, the legend, the people's champion, Luke Toki himself, participating in Traders Australia. So that's going to be fun to watch. We'll be covering it each week here, so make sure to tune in for that. We're going to be covering the challenge, myself and Kahuna, Fat Dad Slim here in the live. We'll be back tomorrow morning, our time here in Australia, to talk about the challenge USA 2, the first episode, and then obviously Survivor is coming back. The Amazing Race is coming back. There's so much happening. So if you like competitive reality TV, you'll love this channel. Please consider subscribing. And on that note, everybody, grab your torches, head back to camp. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye.